lose my mind, I found my soul. There's a difference, although from the outside I understand how the two can look very similar. When a woman begins to wake up, people who only knew her asleep may call it madness. When she stops living by fear, people who benefited from her silence call it rebellion. And when she begins to hear God outside the walls they built for him, they may call it darkness because they do not recognize light unless it comes through their approved window. But I know what happened to me. I know where I was, and I know what I survived. And I know the difference between falling apart and breaking open. This did not begin as a pretty spiritual story. There was no soft music, no candlelight altar, no graceful woman in linen speaking calmly about being in alignment. It began in a body that was failing. It began in a mind that had turned against itself. And it began in a life where I had become so tired, so depleted, and so far away from myself that ordinary things felt impossible. I could not walk across the yard without feeling exhausted. I could not stay awake through the day. I wanted to sleep constantly, not because I wasn't rested, but because some part of me was trying to disappear. I was thin, unhealthy, drained, hollowed out from pain I didn't know how to carry. I had been numbing what I did not know how to heal, and I was not alive. That is a hard sentence to write, but it's true. There are seasons when the body keeps performing the rituals of existence while the soul is already backing toward the door. People may see you moving, talking, answering messages, making dinner, and assume you are still there, but sometimes you are not. Sometimes you are a ghost wearing your own skin. I was in my 40s and I could not run and play with my children the way I wanted to. My energy was gone, my strength non-existent, and my will was pretty much gone too. And when your body has no vitality and your mind has no hope, the darkness can begin to sound reasonable. That's the terrifying part. It does not always arrive like a monster. Sometimes it arrives just like a tired thought, a whisper, a conclusion, a lie that sounds like relief. Maybe nothing will ever change. Maybe I am too far gone. Maybe nobody would really care anyway. Maybe I am already gone already. And then, after the breaking point, something happened. I heard a voice of God. I heard the voice of God in me. Not a sermon, not a long explanation, not a map of the next 10 years, just a command. Clear, simple, final. Get up and don't look back. That was it. Not understand everything, not fix your whole life today, not be healed instantly. Just get up and don't look back. At the time, I wanted answers. God gave me an instruction. And sometimes an instruction is the only answer a person can survive. So I got up. But getting up didn't look like triumph. It looked like crawling back into my life 1 inch at a time. It looked like stepping onto a treadmill in my own home and realizing I could barely walk half a mile. Half a mile. That was my mountain. I would set the treadmill to a walking speed, and I had to hold on to the sides because my body did not trust itself yet. My hands gripped the rails like I was holding onto the edge of the earth. I put earbuds in, and I played songs that carried the strength I didn't have yet. Fight songs, survival songs, songs that reminded me there was still a woman somewhere under the ashes. At first, my body did not believe me. That is something people don't always understand about healing. You can choose to live before your body believes you. You can say, we are staying, while every cell in you trembles in the doorway of the old life. So I had to teach my body, step by step, breath by breath, day by day. I walked, then I walked longer, then I jogged, then one day I could do 30 minutes of solo, solid cardio. 30 minutes may not sound miraculous to someone who has never had to rebuild a body from collapse, but for me, it was resurrection with sneakers on. I was not exercising, I was returning. I was teaching my lungs to trust air again. I was teaching my legs that they could carry me. I was teaching my heart that it could beat for something other than fear. And I was teaching my body, we are not leaving. We are coming back. And as I rebuilt, something else began opening. I had thought wrong for so long that I did not know there was another way to think. My mind had become a room full of old recordings. Shame, fear, self-hatred, despair. I had spoken to myself in ways no human being should ever speak to another human being. I said things like, I hated myself, I wanted to die. Those words were not just thoughts, they were spells of destruction. Every time I repeated them, I carved the same dark road deeper into myself. Then I began hearing different words, not strange words, not dark words, the truth. I began listening to people who spoke about the mind, belief, imagination, the thought, the discipline of thought, and the hidden power inside a human being. People like Neville Goddard, Bob Proctor, Mel Robbins. My very favorite, Jack Canfield, literally saved my life. Teachers like that, they spoke about not giving me a new religion. They opened a door. They were saying things I had never heard before, had heard before, but never understood. And that is when the Bible began to sound different too, especially the words of Jesus. Not the religious Jesus that everyone's afraid of, not the version used to threaten, shame, punish, or separate you from God. Not the one trapped behind pulpits and doctrines and human control. The real one. The way Yeshua spoke about, the truth that sets you free, the one who taught people how to live free, the one who kept saying in every way he could say it, do not be afraid, do not fear, the kingdom is within you, your faith has made you whole, ask, seek, knock, and rise. Follow me. I knew the Bible. I had known the stories most of my life. I knew the verses. I knew the language. But before, I had often needed someone outside of me to tell me what it meant. I needed, a preacher, or a teacher, a Sunday school class, a tradition, a doctrine. Someone else's interpretation. But as I began waking up, the words of Jesus, of Yeshua, started coming alive inside of me. They were not flat anymore. They were not dead text. They had breath in them. It was like they had electricity. They had dimension. It was as though something I had memorized with my mind was finally being understood in my soul. The words I had heard throughout my life began to echo differently because now they were meeting something alive in me. That is what truth does. It waits. It can sit in you for years like a seed under frozen ground, and then one day the season changes. Suddenly what you thought you knew begins to bloom. One story for me changed especially. Ba-dum-bum. The disciples had been fishing all night and caught nothing. Jesus told them to cast their net on the right side of the boat, and then the net filled. I had heard that story for a long time, for decades. I took it literally. They were fishing. They didn't catch anything. Jesus told them to move the net. Then they caught fish. Jesus clearly did some miracle magic or something. That was the story. Do what Jesus says. But suddenly I saw something deeper. Cast your net on the right side. To me, that meant stop casting from the side of fear and stop casting from the side of lack. Stop casting from the side that stares at emptiness and calls it reality. Because that is what we do when we are afraid. We stare into an empty pot on the stove and let the emptiness preach to us. Look, there's no food. I cannot afford good food. I cannot afford that life. I'm not good enough for that. People like me do not get stuff like that. This is all there is. We let lack become the loudest voice in the room. But Jesus was showing me something different. He was saying, you are looking from the wrong side of consciousness. Abundance is not accessed by staring at lack until it hypnotizes you. Provision is not invited by agreeing with absence as though absence is God. Cast your net on the right side. Go to the side of the imagination. Jack Canfield or Bob Proctor says the imagination is the greatest nation. I think it's Bob Proctor. Go to the side of faith. Go to the creative mind. Go to the part of you that can see before the physical world proves it. If the pot looks empty, don't worship the empty pot. Ask what belongs there. Ask what nourishment looks like. Ask what provision would actually feel like. Ask what you are willing to receive. That's not denial. That's not pretending. That's changing the level you are creating from. Because if all I do is stare at lack and say, nothing is here, my whole system organizes around absence. My mind, my body, emotions, choices begin obeying the empty pot. But when I cast my net on the right side, I begin to imagine provision before I can see it. I begin to feel possibility before proof arrives, and I begin to open the inner door that fear slams shut. That part changed me. I realized I had spent much of my life casting from survival, casting from shame, casting from logic without spirit, casting from what I had been told instead of what had been revealed to me. And Jesus was showing me that sometimes the miracle is not somewhere else. Sometimes it's on the other side of your own perception. The other side of the boat you have been sitting in all along. Even the crucifixion began to change meaning for me. I'm not going to pretend I have every doctrine figured out. I'm not here to argue theology, but something became clear in my spirit. Nobody truly took Yeshua's life from him. He willingly went to the grave. And to me, he was showing us something the whole world needed to know. We don't die the way we think we do. The body is not the grave. The body is not the whole self. The grave is not the final authority, and life is stronger than death. That's the good news. Not fear, not separation, not a God waiting to destroy us for being human, but life, return, resurrection, the way through, the truth underneath, and the life that cannot be killed. And that mattered to me because I knew what it was to feel too far gone. I knew what it was to believe my worst moment had become my whole story. But Jesus was no longer someone I only heard about in church. He had become a living truth inside of me, not a threat. The way. Not a weapon, a light. This little light of mine, not a distant judge, a presence calling me back to life. So I kept walking, and I kept listening, and I kept praying, and I kept meditating, and I kept choosing different thoughts, not because I was trying to brainwash myself, but because truth was unfolding. Layer by layer, I was discovering there was more to me than the physical body, more than the problems, more than the pain, more than the visible wreckage appeared to be my life. It was like finding a hidden room in a house I had lived in for years. The room had always been there. I just didn't know how to open the door. Eventually, I left the treadmill and began walking outside. On the land, up and down the hills, through the trees, through the briar, over the fences, across the properties, through the woods. The earth became part of my healing. The road became a chapel, and the trees were the witnesses. The sky became wide enough to hold what I could not yet say. When you have lived inside death energy and then life begins speaking again, you notice everything. A bird, a number, a song, a feather. There were lots of feathers. A phrase, a moment so precise it feels signed. Some people call these coincidences, and I can understand why. I call them signs, synchronicities. But when your soul is coming back into your body, the whole world starts looking less like a machine and more like a conversation. I began to notice synchronicities everywhere. Little flashes of meaning, patterns, repetitions, things that felt too precise to dismiss. It was not that I suddenly believed every small thing was a sign. It was that I had been deadened for so long, jaded. And now I could feel the pulse of the world again, the earth I'm a part of. That alone is holy. And then came the manifestations. And this is where the story begins to sound unbelievable, even to me. I had been studying the power of the mind. I had been writing things down. I make lists. I had been doing what these teachers suggested, imagining, affirming, choosing, focusing, writing desires as though life might actually respond, and life did respond. Things I had written down began happening. Not everything, not instantly, but enough that I could no longer pretend my inner world was meaningless. We moved from a smaller house into a larger house. Felt like prosperity, bigger life, bigger things. Things I had written in a notebook 2 years earlier began showing up in physical form, and it shook me. I'm not going to lie, because I realized I had not only been healing, I had been creating. My thoughts were not just empty, meaningless things. My words aren't empty, and my imagination was not childish. My beliefs were not private little decorations inside my head. They were part of the architecture. And I began to understand that reality was more responsive than I had been taught. Then came the night in the hot tub. By then, life had already changed in ways I could barely comprehend. I had rebuilt my body. I had begun changing my mind. I had watched things I had written down appear in my physical life. I was seeing signs, feeling gratitude, and realizing that life was far more mysterious and responsive than I had once believed. And that night, I was sitting under the sky in prayer, meditation, and extreme gratitude. I was looking at the stars, and one star just kept catching my eye. It twinkled in a way that felt personal. I would look away, then look back, and there it was again, pulsing softly, not demanding my attention, inviting it. And I was thanking God, thanking life, and thanking the universe. I was thanking whatever holy intelligence had carried me from the floor of my life into that moment. And as I gazed at the star, it felt like the light met me. Not like something violent, not like something frightening or weird or woo-woo. It was more like a connection, a response, a holy return. As if I had looked up and whispered, "Thank you for being here," and creation whispered back, "Thank you for being here too." The love came toward me and through me from that light. It filled my chest. It filled the space around me. It was like floating, being embraced from the inside and the outside at the same time. It was like being suspended in living, tangible love. It wasn't romantic love. It wasn't human approval love. It was not conditional love. It was not emotional comfort in an ordinary way. It was larger, cleaner, older. It was living light. It was love with substance. Love that had weight without heaviness. And it was warmth without heat. It was presence without pressure. And it felt as though the air, the water, the stars, and my own heart were all made of the same tenderness. The whole space seemed to glow, not like stage lights, not like imagination, like the veil had thinned, and for a moment I was allowed to feel what is always underneath everything anyway. Love. Not as an idea, as reality. I was not thinking about love. I was inside it, held by it, filled with it, and I was known by it. It knew me, and I knew it. That was the moment I understood that God is not far away. God's not locked behind church doors. He's not waiting at the end of life with a clipboard. God's not something we reach only after death. The divine is here, now, breathing through creation, speaking through stars, and moving through water, touching the human heart when it opens wide enough to receive. Before that moment, I had been saying something over and over. I had been in prayer saying, "I surrender the will of my ego to the joy of my soul," whatever that may look like, whatever that entails. That's what I want. At the time, I thought I understood that sentence, but I didn't. I thought surrendering to the joy of my soul would mean everything would become beautiful and easy. I thought it meant money, love, peace, romance, dancing, freedom, and arrival. And sometimes the soul's joy does look like that, but sometimes the joy of the soul is not exactly comforting. Sometimes the truth hurts, cuts, and sometimes it stings. Sometimes it's the mercy of everything false being stripped away. Sometimes it's watching the life you thought you manifested crack open again, not because you failed, but because your soul refuses to let you live inside of a cage no matter how beautiful it is. That is the part nobody wants to put on a vision board. After the bliss came the dark night. After the manifestation came the stripping. After the mansion came the wilderness. And after the star came fire. And that is the part of the story I'm living now. After everything I survived, rebuilt, and manifested, I found myself alone again. Without the support I thought I would have. Without the money I thought would be there. And without the people I thought would understand. I'm having to work. No big deal. Having to pay rent. Having to keep going while being mocked, judged, labeled, misunderstood, and spiritually slandered by people who do not know the God I met in the water. I have had people call me things I am not. I've had people say I am dark when I know what touched me was light. I've had people use religion as a weapon against a woman who was brought back to life by God. And that's a strange place to stand. Because part of me still asks, how is this the joy of my soul? How is being alone the joy of my soul? How is starting over the joy of my soul? How is rebuilding financially the joy of my soul? And how is being misunderstood the joy of my soul? How is any of this sacred? And how is any of this freedom? And this is what I'm beginning to understand. The joy of the soul is not always happiness. The joy of the soul is alignment. It is the part of you that refuses to betray yourself again and again. It's the part of you that would rather stand alone in truth and be surrounded by a lie. People who cut you off, who don't listen to you anyway. It is the part of you that can lose the house, the role, the approval, and old identity and still say, I'm here. I know what happened to me. I know what I heard, and I know what touched my heart. I know what I survived, and I know who I am becoming. That's the joy. Not the easy kind, not the easy peasy way, the holy kind, the kind that lives under everything. Sometimes it sits quietly in the pasture, like a monk with nothing but breath, silence, and a soul that will not leave. Maybe nobody sees that. Maybe nobody understands. Maybe nobody knows where I am or what I am carrying. But God knows. The stars know, and the earth knows. My body knows. This body remembers when I could barely walk half a mile. And this body remembers when I had to hold onto the treadmill just to keep going. And this body remembers when death was the loudest voice in the room. And now I get up, I go to work, and I pay my bills. I keep moving. Now I do not scream hatred at myself. I do not speak death over my life. Now I understand that the fact I am still here is not small. It's proof. I am the proof. I am the woman who almost disappeared and came back on fire. I am the woman who rebuilt her body one step at a painful time, and I am the woman who changed her mind by letting truth unfold. I am the woman who walked herself out of death energy, and I am the woman who danced herself back into her body. I am the woman who wrote down a new life and watched pieces of it disappear. And I am the woman who heard the words of Jesus come alive from inside the womb. I am the woman who learned to cast her net on the right side, and I am the woman who looked at a star and felt creation hug me back. I've discovered that awakening is not the end of suffering. It's the end of abandoning yourself inside the suffering. I hold myself now, and that is why I am telling this story, because somebody else is on the floor right now. Somebody else thinks they are too far gone, and somebody else cannot walk across the yard without feeling exhausted. Somebody else out there is sleeping all day because their spirit is tired. Somebody else is numbing pain because they don't know what else to do with it. And somebody else is staring at an empty pot and calling it the whole truth. Somebody else is casting from the side of fear, lack, shame, and impossibility. And if that is you, listen to me. Don't try to fix your whole life today. Just get up. Don't look back. Put your shoes on. Walk to the mailbox. Walk across the room. Walk half a mile holding onto the sides if you have to. Put something in your ears that speaks life into you until your own voice learns how. Change what you hear. Change what you repeat. Change what you allow to live in your mind. You're the one in control. And when all you can see is emptiness, don't let that emptiness become your God. Cast your net on the right side. Go to the side of the imagination. The biggest, best nation there is. Go to the side of faith. Go to the side that can see provision before the proof arrives. Act like you've already gotten it. Ask what life could look like if lack was not the final word. Ask what would be in the pot if love, nourishment, and abundance were allowed to enter. Because the body can be rebuilt, the mind can be renewed, the soul can rise through wreckage. And one day you might find yourself standing under the sky, realizing that the life you thought was over was only waiting for you to come back and claim it. No, I did not lose my mind. I lost the programming that was killing me. I lost the belief that I was separate from God. And I lost the lie that my worth depended on being understood. I lost the old self built from shame, fear, silence, and survival, and I found something underneath her. A rising phoenix, a flame, a voice, a soul. And a woman who can stand in the void and still say, I surrendered the will of my ego to the joy of my soul, even when it doesn't really look joyful at the moment, and even when it's not easy. Even when the old life is gone and the new one hasn't fully arrived, the void is not punishment. It's incubation. Maybe loneliness is not the proof of abandonment. Maybe it is the sacred silence before the next creation. Maybe that stripping away your feeling, it was not the end of manifestation. Maybe it was the removal of everything created from fear, ego, survival, or attachment. And maybe, like the woman sitting here now with less than she thought she would have, is actually more powerful than the woman who had everything but did not fully know herself. Because I know my voice now, and I know my God now, and I know my soul. And I know this: the dark night did not come to destroy me or you. It came to remove everything that was not strong enough to cross into the real life. So, if you see someone rebuilding from the ground up, don't mistake them for failure. It's foundation. It's not the end. It's a clean page. This is where the woman who came back aflame learns how to build a life that cannot be taken from her. Not because nobody will ever leave, and not because nothing will ever change, and not because the world will finally clap for her, but because this time she's not leaving herself. And that is the miracle. I am still here, I am still rising, and I am still listening, and I'm still becoming. And one day I may look back at this exact season, the lonely room, the empty hand, the job, the silence, the accusations, the void, and realize this was not where God forgot me. This was where God set me free. Thank you for listening. Remember, it's not what you build, it's what you become.